I'm very excited to be here for my first ACF AGM, and I'm incredibly excited to have been offered this role as CEO of this organisation. And a lot of you would have heard me talk about me getting very excited the day that the board called me and said, would you like to have this role? And I did a dance in my office. And I said absolutely, because this is the most important environment group in the country, I believe, in terms of the leadership we need to drive to create change, to protect this beautiful country in which we live in. Now, I thought that in my last job, which as CEO of Environment Victoria, and I can tell you that many people in the environment movement look to ACF as being the leading organisation. So it's with great excitement and great humility that with Geoff, myself, taking over the reins from Ian and Don, who are wonderful environmentalists but also wonderful Australians. So I'm a little bit intimidated as well. Now, there's been two questions that I've been asked a lot in my first 6 months, and the first is, how did you get Geoff to be your president? How did you get him to agree? And I went, we just asked him. And they went, we didn't think about that one. So people are extremely excited, in fact a little bit jealous, which is exciting. But the other one is that I get asked, are you crazy? Do you know who's running the government at this point in time? And do you seriously want to run an environment group over the next 3 years when the government doesn't like the environment very much? And I thought about that a lot before I took the job, and I thought, well, you know what, I don't think that government should be setting our strategy, ACF's strategy, your strategy, for what matters in this country, what matters for nature and what matters for climate change. We should be setting that, and they need to listen to us. So whoever is in government doesn't dictate my choice here, because I think we need to influence them very heavily and set our own agenda. And one of the reasons why I believe that is because I believe the power of the people is greater than the people in power. And I think we see that over and over again. We just don't always believe it. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what's happened this year about showing that the power of the people is greater than people in power. But before that, because I have to actually tell you about the whole year, and I feel like a bit of a fake because of course I wasn't there for the vast majority of 2013-14 year, I need to also talk about the bad things that happened in that year and the incredibly irresponsible decisions of our federal government. I've got a bit of a list. I thought I had to write it down because I might start crying and tear up as I read through these things. It's best to have them written down. I'm not going to list them all, but here are a few of the top sad things that our government has done. They have scrapped our carbon price, which was working to reduce pollution by 10% from the electricity sector at the time it was scrapped, and pollution is now going back up in this country. They attacked the renewable energy target, which creates not only clean energy, but makes people's electricity bills cheaper. They abolished the Climate Commission, and they tried to dismantle the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, which actually returns a profit to Australians as well as deploying clean energy. And we do note that our Prime Minister is using the Clean Energy Finance Corporation as his big ticket item to our international visitors last week, which is a bit shameful. If I were him, I'd be ashamed of myself. Luckily, I'm not him. They, with the help of the Tasmanian government, did scrap the Tasmanian Forest Agreement, and the federal government did try and delist Tassie Forest from World Heritage listing, and they did that because they wanted to log the forests. And they approved not just the biggest coal mine in Australia, but in the world, and dredging of the Great Barrier Reef and building of a coal port to export that coal to the rest of the world. Now, the list does go on. Unfortunately, marine parks in jeopardy, abolishing the National Water Commission, handing national environment protection powers to the states, or trying to, I'll get to that, slashing $500 million from environmental spending in the budget at the same time as handing out $10 billion, which is 20 times more, I'm a maths genius, to the biggest polluters. So this is what our government did in their first budget. So there is absolutely no doubt that people were really right in asking me if I'm crazy, because times are absolutely tough for those of us who speak up for nature and climate action every day, and that's all of us in this room and many people not in this room. But we're tough as well. So I'm not going to sit back. Nobody's sitting back. Geoff very clearly said we are not going to sit back and watch this, and we haven't. And I just wanted to tell you two stories of some wonderful achievements that have happened this year, which is possibly the hardest year for ACF in its history. The first story is about a tree. This tree is from the Florentine Valley in Tasmania. It's one of the 600-year-old eucalypts, flowering eucalypts, and it's 6 centuries old, which is a long time ago. When this tree was germinating, the Spanish Inquisition was starting. This tree saw the fall of Constantinople and the rise of the Incan Empire. Christopher Columbus had yet to land in the New World, and Botticelli and Joan of Arc were just babes in their mother's arms when this tree was a sapling. This is a really old tree. Our Prime Minister wanted to cut this tree down through delisting the World Heritage, a number of valleys in Tasmania. To delist them from World Heritage listing meant that he would be able to cut that down. Probably not himself. And this is a part of history that none of us can even imagine unless you think about what happens over 600 years. But what's really fantastic is that 400,000 people from around the world said, no way, we're not going to let you do that. Not while we're here, not on our watch. And the most amazing thing about that number is so many of them were international as well as Australian. So ACF led the charge on that with our friends at the Wilderness Society and our friends down Environment Tasmania and other groups. 400,000 people wrote to our government and to UNESCO, the United Nations, to say, no, you don't delist this one. This is an important tree. Our members, our supporters, also delivered a sapling to each Member of Parliament across Australia to actually draw attention to all Members of Parliament to what was happening. And the great story I love about that one is that the volunteers who took the sapling to the Prime Minister's electorate office did so, and we got a phone call at head office from the staff and saying, what is this? What is it? It is a bomb. And we're like, it's a tree. Don't panic, not going to hurt you. In fact, if you plant it, it might actually help you in life. That is actually true. I am not lying about that one. So the UNESCO decided within a matter of minutes, I'm not going to say how many because there'll be a quiz question on this later for some of our staff, to say we're not going to set this type of precedent. That we expect a developed nation to actually protect the most important parts of its environment, and not only that, but the things that actually give us life. It's beautiful in its own right, and it also gives us life. So we protected that tree. Everyone, you guys did it. Yay! And now that tree is protected forever, or until our government get another thought. The second story I wanted to tell you is the story of Michael Ross, who's the fellow in this photo. Mike is from the Ocala community, and the Ocala is smack bang in the middle of Cape York in Victoria's north. See, I can come from a Victorian organisation, Australia's north. And ACF have been working in Northern Australia and collaborating with traditional owners of the land for many, many, many years to try and get the land returned to traditional owners, not just for cultural outcomes, which is incredibly important to those communities, but also for conservation outcomes. And we know that by doing one, you get the other. And ACF has been up there for many years, and I was very lucky to, in my first month or two, get up to meet Mike and be taken out to the Ocala country. And we were sitting around the fire one night with Mike and his friends, Fred and Jack, and they were telling me about the time, their memory, when they got removed from their land, when their mothers and fathers and their cousins and brothers and sisters were removed from their land. And these guys are 55, 60 years old. And they remember their family being removed from their land in chains. I'm glad it was a dark night and it was only firelit, because it was very sad to hear that that happened in living memory of people in this room, of Mike's living memory. The most exciting thing, though, is that in 19 days' time, on the 10th of December, their land is going to be handed back to them. 700,000 hectares of land right in the middle of Cape York is going to be handed back to the Ocala people. And half will be managed by Indigenous rangers as protected areas, as a national park or a regional park. These Indigenous rangers we met too are just fantastic, although they have a different fire management method up in the north, because they just drive along in their cars and flick matches out the window, and that's their fire burning regime. We were in the car behind them going, can you just wait until we get past? Because in Victoria, you know, if you flick a match out, you're in big trouble. This 700,000 hectares joins 1.5 million hectares that has already been provided back to traditional owners in the Cape. And if you drove from Melbourne to Sydney in an electric vehicle with no emissions, you would not cover that much land. It's a huge part of the world. And the north is something I didn't know anything about, and I really wanted to learn about that. And what I've learned is that obviously the development desires of this government that we have are happening on our watch, and this is our responsibility to protect the beautiful north. Right now is when we can achieve that. And on the 10th of December, it's going to be a great day for Mike and Fred and Jack and all of his friends. There are other achievements. Our government's tried very, very hard to get rid of the renewable energy target. The Clean Energy Finance Corporation and the Australian Renewable Energy Agency. They are all still kicking along. We are still working hard to protect them, and it's a little bit of a shock that that Clive Palmer is the hero of that particular episode, but you know, you take it as you can get it. A proposed radioactive waste dump in Muckaty has been dumped. It's not going to go ahead. ACF worked in collaboration with the traditional owners of that area, and they took legal action and they won. The World Heritage Forests are protected, as we know, and the National Environment Protection Laws, which would give powers to states to develop their state in any way they feel fit, it's still being blocked by the Senate. So that the laws that the Abbot government want to do, which is weakening those laws and then giving all power to states to do as they please. And in this state, in Victoria, our current government want to develop a new brown coal export industry. So if you want to talk about really dumb ways of growing your economy, that's got to be right up there. I don't think that our state should have responsibility solely for areas of national significance. And that has, to this day, continued to be blocked and is not proceeding, although we are going to have to work very hard to keep it that way. So even in the most trying of times, we're still getting success, which actually is kind of a little bit shocking, I suppose, because we can easily get so sad and depressed about the state of politics and the state of our nation. But actually, I have great hope for the future. And I'm not supposed to talk about the future, but Geoff needs to understand I'm a visionary type person, so I can't help myself. Every instance, every one of those successes occurred because people stood up and said, I see a better future. And I often think about heroes, and they don't always wear the underpants on the outside and come with capes. Often they're farmers, they're accountants, they're doctors, who all participated in our climate reality training this year and then went out into their own communities, some very conservative, and spoke up and led on climate change. Sometimes these heroes are Indigenous owners, farmers and tourist operators, and they all converged on Canberra. When we asked them to, they all converged on Canberra and met with the senators to say, we don't think you should allow the destruction of the environment protection laws that protect the things that make our home, and our businesses viable. Sometimes it's people who give trees to MPs and scare the bejesus out of them. But all of the times it's the power of the people that make the difference, because it's greater than the people in power. That is why I have great hope for the future, but I do want to be clear, I'm not placing that hope in governments. I wish I could, and something that Ian Lowe said on the radio just after I started and after he ended said that we have tried for decades to get governments to lead of any political stripe. It's not just one side here. We've tried to get them to lead. We've given them evidence, facts, economic arguments, and they have failed essentially to lead. So this, I believe, is a time for community leadership. For us to stand up, as I said before, and say, we think there's a better future than the one you're planning for us. There's a quote I like from Dr. King who says, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." Well, I don't think we're being silent. I don't think you're being silent. We're raising our voice. We're doubling our numbers. So I need to just tell you that in the last 12 months, we have doubled the amount of active supporters in this organisation. By that we mean the people who are delivering things to their MPs, people who are signing petitions. Some of them are members and donors, but we actually also need people to take action. And that number has doubled. So 80,000 more people are doing action now. We have nearly 200,000 active people taking action every day. My goal is to double that again. And we're going to get those people organised. So we really do need to step out of Canberra. Not so much time we'll be spending there. I'm very disappointed about that. And we are going to get back out in the community and foster the type of leadership from community that we actually need to win, to build the type of power that we need to win. And there's community leadership out there. It's absolutely amazing when you get out there and see what people are doing, and we just need to get that organised. That's what we're going to do. And as Geoff said, if we need to stand up to the big polluters, then that's what we'll do. We need to build the power that it's going to take to protect this magnificent country of ours. So it is a time for hope, and I just wanted to finish by another quote that I like, which is, "Hope has two daughters," or sons, I don't know why it's daughters, "anger and courage. Anger that things are the way they are, and courage to make them the way they ought to be." And if I could sum up advocacy or environmentalism, and every day being called some horrible name by someone, often a politician, you feel those two things. You feel anger and then you feel courage and say, I'm going to do it anyway. So none of us would be human if we didn't feel a little bit sad after the year that has been, and a little bit bewildered and a little bit angry. But I think we've got courage, and I, like Geoff, join with you and ask you to stand with us and speak up for the future that we know we can achieve in this country. Thanks.